I'm going to have to talk to your worship committee about making me come up after a Peter Mayer video. So that's going to be a challenge. So thank you for inviting me back. I was a Stokes last time. I have been married for several years, but because of the pandemic, it has taken a long time to get that name change to go through. So consider this your introduction. Today's sermon is presented in chapter form. I have had these little bits of information swirling around in my head, 3 kind of separate stories for quite some time. They may seem unrelated at the beginning, but if I'm successful, by noontime they will all make sense. So chapter 1. Almost 5 centuries ago, a Dutch eyeglass maker discovered that 2 lenses are better than 1. He wasn't building eyeglasses at that moment. Zacharias Janssen is credited with making one of the earliest compound microscopes, which are ones that use 2 lenses, around 1600. Now, whether he was actually the first one to do this or not is not clear. There's some really good historical evidence that his father actually started that inquiry process, but Zacharias is the one who gets the credit. The earliest microscopes, by those developed by him, could magnify an object up to 20 to 30 times its normal size. Roughly 30 years after Zacharias passed away, another Dutchman, Anthony, and I always screw this name up, van Leeuwenhoek, somebody's going to correct me who knows that. Thank you, like she said. Excellent. Was building microscopes by grinding his own lenses. His simple microscopes are more like magnifying glasses with only 1 lens, but because he had the high-quality hand-ground lens, he could magnify objects up to 200 times their original size. Now, he observed animal and plant tissue, he looked at human sperm and blood cells, minerals, fossils, many other things that had never been seen before on a microscopic scale. He presented his findings to the Royal Society in London, where Mr. Robert Hooke was also making remarkable discoveries with his microscopes. While looking at thin pieces of cork, Hooke described what he called pores. He was the first person to use the term cell to describe what would later be recognized as the building blocks of all living organisms, plant and animal. Hooke published a book called the Micrographia in 1665, which was an astonishing collection of illustrations of objects he had observed with his microscopes. You probably would not be too astonished yourself. We see actual pictures, not just drawings of cells, when we're in grade school. Imagine, though, what those images were like to people who didn't have indoor plumbing or electric lights. People didn't even have forks in 1665. And only rich people had chairs. Most people sat on stools or directly on the ground. Chapter 2. There was a Tuesday near the end of July that for me was an amazing day. Nothing singularly spectacular happened, but the sum of the hours was far greater than their individual worth. When I woke up, there was leftover strawberry shortcake from dessert the night before, so I had a delicious breakfast. I then virtually attended a TED Talk broadcast by my employer. The topic was relevant. There was an engaging dialogue among audience members afterward, and I logged out of that Zoom meeting feeling energized. Can you imagine that? A Zoom meeting energizing? Afterwards, I drove to our downtown offices and I attended a live face-to-face Toastmasters meeting. For some background, I've been in Toastmasters for a long time, but my particular club is a corporate club, meaning our employer is supposed to pay the members' dues and provide meeting space and time and encourage participation. They're supposed to work your Toastmaster goals into your personal professional development plan. In reality, we lost all of that back in 2008 when the economy had that drastic downturn and JEA, the utility in Jacksonville, who I work for, cut everything, literally everything. We were allowed to use the 17th floor conference room for our meetings, but everything else was on the club and its individual members. And like everyone else, we went 100% virtual when COVID hit. So despite struggling with recruitment and having to find members without being able to come to work and figuring out how to run we have WebEx for our corporate use, not Zoom, we still managed to grow from the smallest club in our area to the largest in less than a year. We held successful elections for new officers, with about half of our leadership team coming from new members and half being previous members. The officers and I were able to pitch the benefits of Toastmasters to our employer's brand new slate of executives. There was some drama in Jacksonville around JEA a couple years ago, and literally everybody from the CEO down to about the senior director level got fired. So everybody is new there now. We were able to convince those chiefs and vice presidents that the employees' dues would once again be paid by members for the club. So we threw a lunch, a big catered lunch, as an opportunity to celebrate and get together. The CEO was invited, along with our chiefs and our vice presidents, and the managers of our members, to both celebrate the successes of the club and to promote the program, because as it turns out, free barbecue is a wonderful marketing tool. I was super nervous about the meeting. I was an outgoing president and an outgoing officer on the board, and we had just elected all of those new officers. They only assumed their roles the first week of July. None of the new members had ever had a face-to-face meeting because we've been in a COVID environment for 2 years. Out of 28 members of the club, 20 of them had never been to a face-to-face Toastmasters meeting. Never mind one with all the officers and the CEO and everybody else in attendance. Our district leadership from Toastmasters arrived to do an official swearing in, a bit of Toastmasters ritual that none of them had ever seen before. Plus there was a lunch to manage, and we still had to have a regular Toastmasters meeting in the middle of all this. As an outgoing officer, I only peripherally participated in the planning, and I was actually on vacation when the final details were worked out. So when I arrived at the auditorium downtown, I expected to have to jump in. It was going to be all hands on deck, and I was going to have to help in some way. But when I got there, everything was in order. The participants all had the agenda. Everybody knew their roles. Everybody was prepared. All I had to do was mingle and chit-chat. I can do that. It was so amazing. And during the opening events, they presented me with an award. Complete surprise to me, the outgoing board and the incoming board had conspired, and I had no advanced knowledge of it whatsoever. I was so humbled and grateful to be the chosen honoree, but in reality, I was busting at seams with pride at how well those new leaders had taken the reins to put this event together. At the end of the day, I headed with my husband over to a tattoo artist I had spoken to for several weeks before that particular Tuesday. I have had a very nasty scar on my leg from a horrific dog bite that I've been extremely self-conscious about for a long time. And I had probably sent Hambone, that was his name, Hambone, he's a tattoo artist, probably 24 pictures of what I liked, along with what I liked about them and the colors that I liked, and probably 2 paragraphs on exactly what I did not want. And Hambone assured me he'd have the sketch ready when I got there. I was on pins and needles, and he was right. The only change that I made to the tattoo was I added 2 words: no regrets. And Hambone was a pro in dealing with this first tattoo newbie. His shopmate was hilarious. There were 2 best friends in the shop with the other tattoo artists getting little matching elephants put on their hands, and they were cracking jokes, and the atmosphere was absolutely jovial. For the tattoo itself, the pain level was more than tolerable, which is what I was really worried about before we got started. I got to ask a ton of questions. I got to watch this artist ply his trade up close. At one point, he was like, "Can you put your head back a little bit?" Because I wanted to see what was going on. It was fascinating, and it was relatively painless. Now, unfortunately, about a week after that, that all went to complete crap because I got a MRSA infection, which took 2 emergency room visits and a weekend in the hospital and 6 weeks of antibiotics to resolve. But that's a whole nother topic for another Sunday, I think. And I'll offer this aside. I was supposed to be the speaker that Sunday morning at Butman Bridge, and I had to call the worship chair on Saturday and say, I'm in the hospital, so I will not be there. And she asked why. I said, well, I've got this tattoo. And ironically, I had them add at the last minute the words, no regrets. She said, can we share that with the congregation? I said, absolutely. So everybody had a good laugh. And the funny thing is the weekend that I got that dog bite that this tattoo covered up, I was supposed to be the speaker that Sunday and had to call the same worship committee chair and say, I'm not going to be there tomorrow because I'm in the hospital with a dog bite. She doesn't like to hear the phone ring with my phone number on it on Saturday afternoon when I'm supposed to be in church on Sunday. But that Tuesday night, walking out of the tattoo parlor after lunch and the TED Talk and a perfect breakfast and the tattoo going so well at the moment, the best day in a long time behind me, it really felt like the whole world had just aligned for Jennifer's benefit that day. Chapter 3. Do you remember a time when you weren't good at something that you're pretty good at now? Back when you were just beginning or just starting to learn, for skills you learned or started to learn as children, you probably don't understand or don't remember how long it took you to fully master that skill. You might not have known what you didn't know, or even taking on a challenge as an adult, you don't always grasp the full range of effort that you're going to need to get to the level you're striving for. And right now, you may be quite accomplished at Asian fusion cooking or speaking German or playing piano, but can you recall what it felt like to be aware of your noviceness? Have you ever sat back and thought about how far you've come? For activities I'm now skilled at, I don't spend a lot of time thinking back to when I was a newbie. And I don't do that kind of time travel very often at all, except for maybe when the photo albums come out or my mom is telling my kids what kind of kid I was. In the day-to-day, I just go about my life and I do the things that I do, like I've always done them, kind of mindless to the path that got me here. And for a little background, I left high school and joined the Army, and I was a musician. I was a flute player in the Army. I've been a flute player, as far as if you ask me, my whole life. I play in a flute choir in Jacksonville now, and I play at church regularly. I think I'm a fairly accomplished amateur musician. My son Greg is now 35. When he was in 5th grade, we took a trip up to Michigan, which is where my parents live, and we stayed at my parents' house. My sister, Kate, had moved out at this point, but Greg was staying in her old room, and there was still some stuff left behind. So my son went to put the suitcases in the closet to get them out of the way, and he found my sister's old clarinet. He brought it out to the living room, and he was handling this small square case like he discovered it on an archaeological dig. Battered black vinyl case. It still had those puffy stickers we used to stick on everything in the 80s. They were so cool. My sister had so many of them. And inside the case itself were her old method books with her name written in them in her 5th grade handwriting. And I'm sure when she looked at her name in that really old penmanship, she had a lot of memories that came back to her about when she started that journey. So we let Greg take the piece of the clarinet out of the case. My sister showed him how to put together, and he cautiously blew a few notes through the instrument. Now, the pads underneath the keys had mostly dry rotted away. This thing had literally been in a closet for 15 years. He was hooked. At the end of our visit, I packed the relic in my suitcase, brought it back to Jacksonville. I had it repadded, fixed up, and tuned up. And my son, Greg, joined the band in 6th grade, and he played clarinet all through high school. And I recently received pictures through the wonders of technology. We have a shared Apple Drive with my son and my daughter-in-law and grandchildren of my oldest grandson, Charlie, who just turned 8, trying to play that same clarinet. Oh, the joyful noise. Let's go back, though. When Greg was just starting out, and he was a little older than Charlie is right now, it was only joyful noise for about 20 minutes. Then it was hours of practice, of squeaks, of missed pitches, and just wrong notes. There were clarinet teachers to be hired, last-minute runs to the music store because I got to have a read for school tomorrow, Mom. There were grade school band concerts on Thursday nights, and I am so grateful that they handed out paper programs because we never would have known what song those kids are playing without them. There were even more squeaky notes and miscues, and that poor middle school band director trying so hard to keep 40-some beginner musicians on the same sheet of music, literally. And at the end, the kids were so proud of themselves, and the parents clapped so vigorously because they were proud too, but they were glad it was done. And after one such concert, I remember calling my parents back up in Michigan, and I told them thank you. For what? They asked. I said, for all those years, you listened to me and my sister play our instruments terribly. Because I'm good at it now, but I wouldn't be if you hadn't had nerves of steel. And that was before noise-canceling headphones existed, so I know they heard every single note. Chapter 4. Quote, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Attributed to Winston Churchill from his speech to Parliament in 1948. What he actually said was those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. In 1948. But back in 1905, the Spanish-American philosopher George Santayana wrote in Volume 1 of The Life of Reason, quote, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. My first challenge to this sentiment is that if you haven't learned or remembered your history, how would you know it's a repeat? I guess you have to rely on other smarter people to point it out to you. More importantly, though, why is repeating something cast in a negative light? Are we only to be doomed or condemned? I'd love to have another Marvelous Tuesday. I'd be pleased to know the history of that one little clarinet is going to be repeated in the future. And I really need people to keep inventing cool technologies like microscopes and to help humankind make life in general better. So on the days when I rail at the universe for its unfairness on my what I call anti-Tuesdays, I can recall that good Tuesday and that good time. And we can all rely on our past experiences, and we can rely on the experience of others known to us and by us to move ahead. And I can't build a microscope, but I'm glad somebody can. Which brings us to our final chapter, also known as the conclusion. There might not be a discernible reason in the moment why things happen. Why did Zacharias Jansen stack up lenses in a way no one else had before? Unless he was copying his dad. Was he just goofing around and discovered something amazing? Did his wife come into the workshop the night before and tidy everything up and she stacked them up and he walked in and went, ooh, look at that. Why did that particular clarinet of my sister's get forgotten in that closet? Why was that Tuesday in July for me in that particular year such a good day? Even in hindsight, we may never get the full story. We may never understand all the minutiae that come into play to create that final outcome. But humans are naturally curious, which for the most part has worked out for us. We figured out how to control fire, how to make Levi's, and how to build skyscrapers. When confronted with a puzzle, we poke around at it as a species to test and retest and hypothesize and test again until we solve that particular mystery. And one solved mystery often opens up the door to more mysteries, and we just keep going. The knowledge is out there. Some of it we can get right away, like how to say good morning in Swahili. The internet's good for that. It's Jumbo, by the way, Jumbo. And I had the opportunity a couple months ago, I saw a motivational speaker on YouTube. She built her house solely by watching YouTube videos. No construction experience whatsoever. Literally, she and her 4 kids set every block, framed every wall, wired every switch. Her name is Kara Brookins. Now, granted, she could not do today in Florida what she did in Arkansas in 2008 because, building codes. But her quest to do nothing more than provide a safe home for her family led her to a whole new career and literally international fame. And it was right there. For Kara, all she had to do was ask the internet. Life is not the internet, however. I'm going to repeat this for my 17-year-old stepson when I get home. Life is not the internet. Some knowledge is only revealed to us as answers to a question that only leads us to the next question, which is why we're all sitting here. How a single lens led us to a microscope, led us to a telescope. We can see inside cells, and we can see across the galaxy. And we figured that out within a couple hundred years. And once we had a lens, we built from there. Can you imagine what we'll be able to see in another 100 years? There's a constant thread in the evolution of events that one thing builds on another. The development of the microscope led to other discoveries, which marched side by side with other scientific advances, which led to more discoveries and more advances. And it's a chartable story of progress, logical and understanding, but often only in retrospect. A single clarinet led to a logical, although unforeseeable at the time, chain of events for my family. And I think my sister decided to play clarinet because I started band a year earlier than she did, and I had already decided to play the flute. Why did I pick the flute? My inner 9-year-old refuses to tell me. And I don't know why that Tuesday was such a good day. But even now it's past, I can appreciate the fact that it was. And even as the day unfolded, even as I went from one event to the next and went, wow, I still couldn't understand it. I still can't explain it. And it was a wonder. As people, as human beings, I feel like we're on a great archaeological exploration, but instead of seeking for relics or tombs, we're sifting for answers. We brush away one layer to discover more and more beautiful layers underneath, and it just keeps spreading out and opening up like a kaleidoscope of wonder. And as I move through my day and all of my days, I can use this knowledge and the knowledge of those that have come before me to rest assured that the storyline continues. And I can't see the next chapter, but I can feel the weight of the book in my hands. Thank you.